Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name's Mike, and I'm the programs director here at Africa Fire Mission, and we're so happy you took time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's training. Today, we're joined by Brian Andersen. Brian is one of our volunteers, very active volunteer with us here at Africa Fire Mission. He's led a number of our sessions already this year. He's back today to talk a little bit about fire behavior and do a couple little practical demonstrations for you. Should be a really interesting class. So we're excited to have Brian back with us today. Before we get started, just a couple of administrative notes. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, you can earn a certificate of attendance for today's training. Uh, if you get cut off or you can't stick around for that time, there's some other ways that you can earn that certificate of attendance. If you go to our webpage at www.africafiremission.org, under the training materials, resources, and training materials section, there'll be a link to a Google Drive folder where you'll be able to find a recording of today's session, as well as all the other trainings that we've done so far this year. If you answer a few questions, show us that you learned something from that training session, I can get you a certificate of attendance for those classes as well. When we get finished here at the top of the hour, we're going to transition into our tea time. So if you have the time, please stick around for that. It's a time where you can ask questions about today's training or just a chance to network with other firefighters from throughout Africa. So if you've got the time in the bundles, I encourage you to stick around for that as well. Keep your eye in the chat. We'll post some links to that Google Drive folder that I was talking about, some other information. Check your name there. Your screen name, excuse me, is what we use for your certificate. So adjust your screen name if you need to what you'd like your certificate to appear as. And we'll get that taken care of for you after class today. So now I think I've covered all of the sort of highlights of things. So I'm going to pass things over to my friend Brian here, and he's going to get us started with today's training.
All right, I appreciate it, Mike. Thanks. Um, thank you all for coming. Like Mike said, we're going to talk a little bit about fire behavior today. There is a slideshow, but also there is some experiments we're going to do. Try not to burn down my fire station. We'll see. So, a little bit about me. I started firefighting in 2004. I've been every rank, assistant chief, fire marshal, some unpaid, some on career departments. Um, I have a master's degree of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I've been with Africa Fire Mission now since 2012. I'm currently the training officer. I haven't updated that, but I'm currently the training officer for my volunteer department, and I work full time as a safety officer, a safety coordinator for the oil fields of North Dakota, from North Dakota up into Alaska, that northwest region of the United States. So pretty busy. Serve on a whole bunch of volunteer boards, and yeah, really enjoy it. And I really enjoy my time coming here to Africa Fire Mission and helping. So, got a question for you guys on this next slide. What I want you to do is put your answer as quick as you can into the chat. That's easy enough, right? So, let's talk about the flood. So, how many animals did Moses take on to the ark with him during the Great Flood, going back to biblical times? Anyone? How many animals did Moses take on the ark with him? It's a trick question. And for those of you who've been in some of my classes, you know I have these tricks, right? Moses didn't take any animals on the ark with him as Noah. What I did to you though was I got into your fast thinking versus slow thinking. And what I did is I had a biblical story that was about water and combined the two just to throw you off. That's fast thinking, where you take these little clues that you see around you and you make assumptions and you come up with an answer, right or wrong. That's the answer. And in the fire service, we have to do fast thinking a lot, right? We have to make these split second decisions. Because if there's someone that's inside the house or inside the building that can't breathe because they're suffocating from smoke, we don't have the time to sit here, go through slow thinking, analyze everything, do our research, and then go and put out the fire. So how do we improve our fast thinking versus our slow thinking? The way to improve the fast thinking is to go to trainings and get that knowledge behind you. Just like you're doing today. Get that knowledge behind you. Then when you get out on that emergency scene, you're still going to do fast thinking, but you're going to make good, accurate decisions, either as a command officer or as a firefighter. You're going to know what nozzle to grab, what line to grab, and you're going to understand the reason why, okay? Let's see, go back here. So, if you ask most firefighters, what is fire, they're going to stumble through it. They're not going to be, no one can just answer it and give you the definition. There are some people that can. Fire investigators usually can, because that's one of the first things. If you're on the stand prosecuting an arson case, the defense is going to come up to you and ask the fire investigator, "What is fire?" And if you stumble through it, the defense is going to be like, "You can't even tell me what fire is, but yet you're trying to convict my client of arson." So if you look at any definition of fire, there's a few things. It's rapid. It's a rapid oxidization. Rapid's important. It's a chemical reaction, and the result is light and heat. If you look at any definition, you can remember those three things. It's some sort of variation depending on what dictionary you're using, okay? So what is flame? The flame is the chemical reaction between the oxygen and the fire. It's just the smallest part of the fire, but that's the attention grabber, right? That's where the work is being done by the fire, is within that flame. It's kind of like when you lightning and thunder. The lightning is the stuff that gets the work done. It's what people see. It's what can start fires and that type of stuff. There's two different types of flames: the premix flame and the diffusion flame. Premix flame is really easy for all of us to understand, because it's the propane cylinders that we use for cooking, okay? The regulators on those propane cylinders put the exact amount of fuel out you need to match with the air ratio, and you get the flame. So you have the fuel and the air, and then you get the flame. A diffusion flame is where the fuel and air are separated until they get to the flame part. Okay, so the premixed is, you have your fuel air ratio, just like your internal combustion engines. You have a fuel air ratio, and then that is ignited, and that's at the flame, or before the flame, and then The diffusion flame is ignited at the flame, okay? That's where the difference is. We mainly deal with diffusion flames. So as we study this today, there was a guy in the 1800s called Michael Faraday, and he's a physician or physicist, sorry, not physician, and he did all these experiments about flame and oxygen and fuel air ratios, and he used a candle to do it. And these experiments in the 1840s led to the internal combustion engine. Without these experiments that we're going to do some of which today, we couldn't have cars, we couldn't have fire trucks, couldn't have any of these internal combustion engines because we didn't know about flame, a simple element of fire. So here's a little bit better of a demonstration. You have your premix flame down here where you've got your fuel from the wick of the candle and the wax of the candle coming up the wick. It meets the air and it's all mixed right there at the source. Your diffusion flame is up top. So let's talk a little bit about laminar and turbulent flames. Let's switch back to my camera here. Are you guys seeing my camera or Mike's camera? I just see Mike's. But... So,
nope, you're good.
Okay. So when we do this, we'll do this one here. This would be a laminar flame. It's a single flame. It's straight. It's very clean burning, no soot. Now when we light a candle, it'll become a kind of a turbulent flame until it evens out and becomes a laminar flame on the candle. Granted, this lighter is a little excessive, so it had a bigger fire than most lighters. But that's the difference between a laminar flame and a turbulent flame. The thing about it is, if we can understand this flame and why it acts the way it acts, we can use that knowledge to increase our fast thinking on any fire, even modern fires, like electric vehicles. You know, in the 1840s when Faraday was doing these experiments, they didn't have electric vehicles. So he couldn't study the flame of an electric vehicle fire. But the flames still have certain behaviors to them that are just standard. And if we can figure out that flame, we can figure out the turbulent flames that we see all the time in our wildlands and within our structure fires. So when the fire is acting on a piece of wood or whatever it's burning, it undergoes the process of pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is when the heat of the fire starts breaking down this chemical or breaking down this material that's burning, and then it's burning the off gas of that chemical compound. So wood is a carbon-based product, right? Oil's a carbon-based product. Plastics are all derivatives of oil. So it has a carbon chain. And what the fire does is starts breaking apart that carbon chain, and you get the fire, you get the light and the heat, which is the part of the fire that you see and feel, right? But you'll also get all this extra stuff. CO poisoning, hydrogen, whatever. This CXHY, what that is unburnt carbon molecules. So that's when you get your incomplete combustion, is from that CXHY, is your incomplete combustion. So as a byproduct of fire, we do end up with a fuel source also. So let's do this next experiment here, and I'll prove to you that we have incomplete combustion. So I'm going to light my candle again. Let's see. Move my camera here a little bit. So we can see the candle is burning in a nice laminar flame. I blow the candle out and we get smoke. I can light the smoke without lighting the I can light the wick without lighting or by lighting the smoke. So let's try this again. Did you guys catch that? It happens pretty fast, but I do not touch the wick with the flame. That fire's jumping, you could say, from my lighter to the wick. And what that is showing that there's particles, carbon particles within the smoke that's fuel load. Okay, so how is this important to us as firefighters? It's like, oh yeah, it's a cool little experiment to do, but how is it important to us as firefighters? Smoke is fuel. Remember that. For those of you who are making command decisions on the fire scene, if you roll up to a house and you see a bunch of smoke coming out the windows, but you don't see active flame, well, what that tells us is smoke is fuel, so you have your fuel. There's obviously heat because there's a fire somewhere. So what is it missing? It's missing its oxygen. And that's when you can have a backdraft scenario, right? So you got smoke coming out, you got fuel coming out, you need the oxygen. If you introduce the oxygen, you could have a backdraft. So as a commander, that will tell you how you're going to ventilate that smoke out of the area to help get that fuel out of the area and introduce oxygen without having a backdraft explosion, basically. Another thing about this candle, I have my thermal imaging camera here, one of our cameras off the trucks here, and I should have turned it on. Okay, we'll try this. If we look there at the thermal camera, we can see that the flame is about 219 degrees, around 200 degrees, somewhere there. Now, if I light more candles, no, that one's not on. If I light more candles here, I can feel the heat coming off this, right? 4 candles now. I can feel a lot more heat coming off of it. But when I look at the temperature of the area, it's still around that 200 degree mark, right? Like the temperature didn't increase because I lit more candles. And what this tells us is the temperature is steady based on the fuel that is burning. And you're all sitting here saying, "Hey, Brian, no, hold up. I have been to this structure fire, and it was hot, way hotter than any other structure fire I've been to." Right? We've all been to those fires. We've all been to those ones. It's like, nope, that fire, it was hotter than the other house fire. Well, what that is house fires burn pretty much at the same temperature. All house fires burn relatively close to the same temperature, just like our candles. It doesn't matter how many candles I pile on here, it's going to burn at the same temperature. What it is your heat release rate. I increased my heat release rate 4 times so I could feel the energy of the fire, and that's exactly what heat release rate is the energy of the fire and what you're feeling. It's putting off more energy now since I have 4 candles than it did with 1 candle. And we could go down the rabbit hole of heat release rate and how fire transfers that way. But that could be a whole nother class also. What I want to show with this class is understanding the flame and the smallest part of the fire will help you understand fire transfer, heat release rate, and some of those other things. Um, so we also see, staying with this first experiment for a while here, we also see this when a house is about ready to flash over. If you're going into a hallway towards the seat of the fire and you start seeing flames overhead within the smoke, what is that telling you based on our first experiment? You have flames, so you have heat. You have smoke, so you have fuel. It's just a little bit of oxygen is needed, and we don't know exactly where that oxygen is going to come from, but there's going to be a flow path into the house of oxygen and a flow path out of the house of smoke. And where we're at when the smoke is starting to flame over top of you, you're getting really close to flashover. So that's a sign as an interior firefighter that you need to figure out some sort of pretty quick decision, whether it be get this fire out right now, back out and try to reattack it from a different direction or something. But that's a sign. It's really cool to see, and it's pretty cool thing to see smoke overhead and fire coming through the smoke. But it is telling you something, and we need to understand what it's telling us, right? So the next experiment I'm going to show you guys. We'll light our candle again. Got our candle lit, and like I said, it's a pretty laminar flame, but you can see how the slightest breeze from my hand impacts it. That's just like the weather. We all know about the weather with wildland fires, uh, dumpster fires. It's all impacted by wind, right? House fires, electric vehicle fires, all of it is. But let's take this. I have a wire mesh here. This is just a mesh that you have from a screen door or screen window or something like that. Just a wire mesh. Take the wire mesh and put it over top the flame, and you can see the flame is hollow. Why would that flame be hollow in the center? Well, it's burnt up all the oxygen in there. So you're only going to have the flame when it's coming in contact with the fire, okay? Or when the fire is coming in contact with the oxygen, okay? The flame is not in the center there. And if you have a turbulent flame with a whole bunch of fire going around here, it's going to be the same thing. You're not going to have flame in the center because there's no oxygen. You're going to have flame on the outsides. Obviously, it's a lot more because it's turbulent, but it's the same thing. But also, I got my candle here. I put the wire mesh over top, and that flame will not go through that wire mesh, which doesn't make sense because there's holes in that wire mesh, so it should just pop right through, right? So why wouldn't it go through that wire mesh? Well, the reason is this wire mesh is cool. So when the flame comes in contact with this mesh, you're cooling down the fire. That's why I have flame underneath, because it's still the same temperature underneath. But the wire mesh cools down to the fire to the point that it can't ignite the fire in the air above it. So what is this similar to what we see? Do we see wire mesh out in the field when we're putting out fire? Well, it's not a wire mesh, right? But it's the container. Whatever's on fire, whether it's the roof of the house, the ceiling of the room, the hood of a car, and you have the engine compartment on fire. All that's your wire mesh, right? It may not have the holes, but it's cooling the fire. So that leads us to heat transfer. This fire has to go somewhere, right? Because as it's burning, as this fire is developing and progressing, you're heating up the air around it, and that creates an imbalance. And the hot air wants to go where the cool air is, and the cool air wants to go where the hot air is, and that's where you get your fire flow. Got cool air coming in, the hot air rises and it leaves, so you got your fire flow and their flow path and all that. And we know as firefighters how important it is to truly control that flow path, right? We know close all the doors you can, basically keep the windows closed. If you're going to break a window, make sure that you're not going to impact the flow path of it and stuff like that. Well, as this fire grows, it's going to impact the roof or the ceiling of the room first, okay? And that ceiling is cool, so it's going to stop the fire from spreading further. You know, if it's on the first floor, it'll stop the fire spread to the second floor. If it's on the second floor, you know, it will stop the fire from spreading in the attic, whatever. But at the same time, that heat from the fire is transferring. You have three ways of heat transfer: radiation, convection, induction. Radiation being the big one. You know, the sun radiates its heat down, and that's what we feel here, is the radiant heat from the sun. So convection, what convection is, it's warming the air, and then the air around you is warming you. That's convection in a very simplified version. And then conduction is where it warms an object, and then that object transfers that heat to another object. So conduction, if I warm this piece of metal here, it will warm here, then it'll warm up through here, and eventually start this part on fire. That's conduction. So when you're in a room, you have this fire going in a bedroom or whatever. It's getting to the walls, it can't move because the wall's cold. It's getting to the ceiling, it can't move because the ceiling's cold. It's getting to another piece of furniture and it can't move because that piece of furniture is cold. So the fire is going to start warming all that up through the radiant heat. Okay? And as the fire's, all this radiant heat is impacting the materials around it, it's warming it up till it gets to its ignition temperature. And that's how the fire is going to spread from room to room or through it. If I held this wire over top the candle and I could hold it perfectly still, which I can't, but if I could, eventually it'll warm up this wire enough that it'll pop through. And then you'll have flames on the cold side. So if I held it here long enough without moving, eventually that fire would pop through because it will have to warm this up enough for it to work. So you can start seeing, if you understand how flames work, no matter how small the flame is, you can start understanding that a flame is a flame. And it doesn't matter what type of fire it is, it doesn't matter what the next challenge in the fire service is, it's going to behave a certain way. Um, yeah, and in Africa, like it's one thing when I teach this class in the U.S. I can go into detail because our houses are built pretty similar in my hometown. We have a pretty simple footprint of buildings, right? But when for those of you in Africa, you have a wide range of buildings that you have to be prepared for, or a wide range of fires, right? Um, so I encourage you, and I do this still. I think to myself when I'm out in public, when I'm at my office at work, when I'm here at the fire station, I'm like, okay, if a fire is here, where's it going to spread to and why? And then this is where a lot of the fire codes come from. They look at historic fires, how the fire spread throughout the building during that historic fire, and then they decide, okay, we need to put firewalls here. We need to there's firewalls, fire barriers, and other type of things like that. That way they can control that fire. The firewall, what it is, it can just absorb more radiant heat. So it might have a 1 hour fire rating, it might have a 2 hour fire rating. It just means it can absorb that radiant heat for 2 hours, right? So okay, I got a little off track with my slides here. I want to show this screen quick. So when we look at this screen, this is a good example of that that smoke coming out and that roof being cool. Okay, so we can see in that picture on the left a whole bunch of smoke coming out. There's no fire flowing through that smoke. So what that tells me is that roof line and the ceiling within the building is keeping that fire cool. If I had to make a command decision, and you never want to make a command decision on a photograph, of course, but you want to do a 360 and actually get your eyes on the prize. But if I was going to make a command decision, I'd probably feel pretty comfortable putting guys on the roof on the left. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of smoke, and it's like, why would you do that? Because I know from these experiments that it would look at the right. If that roof line was getting ready to collapse, um, you'd have you'd have you'd have that heat transfer going through it. You'd have some sort of signs of heat transfer. On the right, it's active flames, but it could be structural integrity, which you'd feel as a firefighter walking on the roof and stuff like that. So, um, and that's what you're looking for when you're doing roof ops, is you're looking for signs of heat transfer impacting the roof. So if they say the roof feels spongy, or if you see active flames like that, that's telling you where the heat is in the fire. Okay, this next experiment, I I don't know if we can do. I'll try it. I don't know if we can do this one. Light my candle again. Over a camera, it might be really hard to see. So, got my candle fire here. Um, Now, candles are inherently designed to be a very clean burning flame.
Stop your share, Brian.
Oh, good point. So I have a very clean burning flame. Now, if I can, sometimes you can get it where you can see the shadow of the soot on this white piece of paper. Yeah, it's not going to show up on a camera. So, okay. It just shows if you have a more of a dirty flame, what you can do is with that experiment, you can put like a white piece of paper behind it or something, and you can see the shadow inside the flame, and that shadow is soot. So you can see where the soot is located. If you like with all my trainings, I've told you all this many times. With all my trainings, I hope you take them back and you teach your fellow firefighters what I'm teaching you, right? Knowledge sharing is the best. So if you go back to your stations and you do this experiment, what you're looking for is to see the shadow within the flame, and that shadow is soot. And then that soot's going to come out in smoke, and then that's your unburnt fuel, right? Okay, let's go. Um, so, like I said, Faraday, he did these experiments in the 1840s, and I don't remember how to spell his name. If you want to look it up, it's Michael Faraday, Faraday, I think. So if you want to look it up, I encourage you to look it up and do more research about it. Because then you can go into heat transfers. You can go into heat release rate, temperatures, flow paths. So you can see all the stuff that his experiments in the 1840s opened up into more topics and more research and more science behind firefighting. So I did want to talk about flow paths a little bit more, and I don't have a small scale experiment for this, but when you look at flow paths, what you see is what, normally we go into the front door to put out the fire. What you see is a neutral plane. You see a level of smoke coming out the front door, and then under it, you see clean air coming in. Now, as the fire progresses and as the fire builds, that level of smoke is going to go down that door frame, and that level of clean air is going to get smaller and smaller going in. So, what happens here? If that fire needs oxygen and a certain amount of oxygen, right? So if you have a door frame with a bunch of smoke coming out and it's slowly working its way down, then you'll start suffocating out the fire. And then that as the fire suffocates out, it'll be produce less smoke, and you'll start seeing that flame or that smoke rise in that door frame. Now, typically we don't see it in door frames. Door frames are just the best visual example. If you look at your house, all your house fires afterwards, you'll see at the bottom of the door a clean area, and that clean area is where the clean air went through. But if this house was sealed up, now you'll see the same thing where the flow path is coming in out the windows. So you have a lot of smoke coming out the windows and a little bit of air coming through, or out the eaves of the house. And this shows your backdraft scenario that I was talking about earlier. So what do you do when you see anything in backdraft, right? You have to ventilate it. You have to control the oxygen going in, because right now you have an uncontrolled fire. You're going to introduce oxygen with your hose stream and when you enter the building and stuff. So you have to control how you introduce the oxygen. So you can see how a little class on flame and just what a flame is, now it turns into a ventilation class. And I already talked about flashover, right? What is flashover? Flashover is basically where everything in the room ignites at the same time. Of course, you don't want to be in that room because you don't want to be one of those things that ignite. So, and that goes back to this little flame. This little flame is putting off radiant heat. Now, it's not enough radiant heat to impact everything in this room. It'll burn itself out by the time it has that much energy. But as the radiant heat is impacting all the furniture around a fire and stuff like that, it's warming it up until we get to that temperature. So that temperature for auto ignition is the same. But like I said, it goes back to what is the heat release rate? How much energy does this fire truly have, right? Um, how is this fire going to impact it? So what increases the heat release rate could be something like your surface to air ratio or surface to mass ratio. If you go to a building that is under construction, where it's just 2x4s and 2x8s and stuff exposed, that's going to have a huge heat release rate. Gasoline has a huge heat release rate, but burns at the same temperature basically as wood. So that's just a quick little summary. I did want to bring up one last thing. Then I'll open up for questions. Why is it important doing this soot experiment that I was trying to show you? Why is it important to talk about soot and where's it from? Where is it originating from, and stuff like that? And that it's important because it is a fuel load. I guess there's a couple of reasons why it's important, but it's also important because we're dying of cancer. Firefighters. I have a friend right now. He had cancer 5 years ago in his throat as a result of firefighting. And yesterday he just had his, it must have been 18th or 19th radiation treatment for a different cancer because of firefighting. So imagine this candle is a tire. And you know where the soot's coming from, right? It's coming from that tire that's burning. And then you're just breathing that in. Now imagine it's a dumpster and all the chemicals and all the craziness that's in that dumpster and in that trash pile. And it's just burning right here at the dumpster, and all that soot is within this flame. It gets released from smoke, and you're breathing that in. Think about all the disgusting chemicals that's going to impact the rest of your life from breathing that in. And I am aware there's a lot of firefighters on this call that don't have access to air packs, don't have access to the SCBAs and the respiratory protection you need. But we have to stop breathing in smoke, okay? It's because that is soot. You're breathing in those tires. You're breathing in whatever is in that trash can, whatever hazardous materials in that trash can. And what we don't want to do is have a great career in the fire service. We have a lot of pride in what we do, and then we get to retirement, or we get to an age where we can finally relax and enjoy the grandkids, and then we die because we had cancer. Or we can't enjoy the grandkids because we can't breathe anymore. Playing with the grandkids wears us out after 2 minutes. So we have to take care of ourselves, because these chronic conditions in the fire service are really having an impact on the quality of life we have when we leave the fire service. So, and that's one thing, as you're teaching your fellow employees about these candle experiments, be sure to bring that up. You can try to show them where the soot is at in this little flame, but tell them why is it important to know where the soot's at, because it gives that visual representation, of, okay, the soot is there, and it's whatever products in that tire fire, in that house fire, these lithium ion batteries, all these issues we're having. So I appreciate the time, and I wanted to leave a few minutes open for questions. So what kind of questions you guys have for me today? Let me go through the chat here.
Yeah, let me adjust some settings here. Okay, if you guys have any questions, you can, of course, use the chat feature, drop a question in the chat. You can use the raise hand feature, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. The floor is open.
I think we did 3 experiments. Faraday did 6, if I remember right, and did a pretty big, much more in-depth research on each one of the experiments. So I do encourage you to go seek out Faraday and what his experiments were. So Errol's here now. What kind of questions do you have, my friend?
Hi, Brian.
Hey,
You well?
yeah, what kind of questions you got? You have some question, don't you?
I was just wondering, how is the flow path of those fires that are not visible? Those kind of chemical fires that are not visible. How do you know their flow path?
Let me see if I can find a picture quick.
Okay.
But um what it's doing is it causes a pressure differential because the temperature outside the fire is uh, greater than or is cooler than the temperature inside the fire. So try to find one that keeps it basic here. I think I'm sharing the right picture. You guys can see this now, right? You
Yeah.
have you have the inlet and the outlet. The reason why this is the outlet is because the temperature in the fire is taking the path of least resistance. Because cooler air is more dense than this hot air, so the hot air is going to rise, the cooler air is going to sink. So you have this inlet. Now, as this fire progresses, there won't be enough room for all this hot air to exit this window or whatever is right here. So the smoke's going to start building. It'll work its way down here, and you'll start seeing on the door frame smoke coming out here. Um,
All right. Uh, we lost our connection there with Brian, so we'll start to wrap things up here. Let me end out today's session. Invite you all to stick around here. We're going to transition into our tea time in just a moment, but let me start out by thanking Brian for coming and leading today's lesson. Brian does so much work for us. Great volunteer. We're really fortunate to have him working with us on our team. Thanks to all of you guys for coming out and joining us for today's training session. We don't take you guys for granted, the fact that you're out there trying to better your community by taking your own time to attend these training sessions. It's really great. Really appreciate all of you doing that and being here, spending your time and your bundles to be with us. We've got plenty of seats available here. Um, so if you know anybody else that might benefit from our lessons here, please feel free to share that link. Be sure you check out Africa Fire Mission's webpage, www.africafiremission.org. Um, there you'll find all sorts of, go to the resources tab. We've got all sorts of free resources there, training materials, lots of great stuff for you guys to utilize. Okay. And then check out while you're on that web page, you can find links to all of our different social media accounts. We're on all of them. Um, uh, we're trying to gain some more subscribers on some of those. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, especially, I invite you to go search for Africa Fire Mission on YouTube. That's where you'll find recordings of all of our sessions. They come out Friday mornings at 8 a.m. East Africa time. So please find us on social media, do the like, the subscribe, and all that sort of stuff. We would really appreciate it. At this point in time, we're going to transition over to our tea time. So I'm going to end things in the formal part of our training with thanks again to Brian and all of you. And I hope to see you all again next week.